соответственно, наш вопрос, я вспоминаю о виде, времена меняются, и мы меняемся вместе с ними. Было ли что-то изменилось у вас в то время, когда вы писали книгу о России, и насколько, может быть, неожиданным был для вас этот опыт? Что для вас стало неким, может быть, особым переживанием в связи с этим?
I think the biggest surprise is that a system that seemed to be working fairly well, whereby President Putin was able to govern the entire nation with support from very many different groups together, has turned into a system in which he is being supported by one group against another. So I think that's the strangest thing. And in fact, what I can't still understand, actually, is how it's possible, why it happened that the group that, in a sense, he was proudest of, the group he had created, the middle class of Moscow, the internet-savvy, modernized group that, of course, thrived under his government, he has turned against them as if they were traitors to him, and has taken the group that originally were voters for the Communist Party, or for nationalists, or for Rodina, or for some other, were not actually part of the Russia of the future, the Russia that was developing, and he's turned to them as his supporters. So this is an incredible paradox. He originally was governing with the modernizing classes, neutralizing rural Rust Belt Russia, and now he's tries to neutralize modern urban Russia and to govern with Rust Belt rural Russia, who basically have nothing to offer to the future. So this is the main paradox.
Это было полной неожиданностью для вас.
I find that impossible to understand. That was very unexpected. I do understand what happened with September 24th in 2011 and the elections and the protests. I see that he was shocked, or he was angry, but I don't understand why he didn't appreciate how the earlier position of accepting a semi-loyalty of the let's say the Moscow classes was sufficient, and why he, particularly now, and I think, okay, so actually the most surprising thing is the following. For the last 20 years, there has been a slow creation of diaspora Russian communities all over the world. This is not tax evasion. These are communities built in London, in New York, in Paris, in Vienna. All over the world there are Russian communities that are connected with Russia, but that are deeply integrated in other countries. And it's not possible to tell these people that they must renationalize all their wealth into Russia. That's just an impossible thing to ask. So this attempt, and of course these groups are part of Russia's connection to the world. There are things that have made Russia today part of the modern world. And to try to introduce into these groups a sense of that they are traitors to Russia is a very odd thing to do from the point of view of building Russia's power. That I don't understand the logic of that. So I think that's неожиданно, or that's not even understandable, really, from the point of view of his own project.
Ну, это очень интересно, потому что на самом деле тот средний класс, который создавался Путиным, в смысле вами обозначенном, то есть модернизаторский класс, modern class, он же никогда не мыслится идеологическим в той программе, которая предлагалась Кремлем. Он мыслится модернизаторским, может быть, с точки зрения своей экономического замаха, технократически мыслился. Economic capacities, вот что было в центре рассуждения о среднем классе. А в остальном он был абсолютнейшим образом идеологически аморфным, никому не принадлежащим с точки зрения политической своей принадлежности и так далее. То есть, в принципе, Путин, наверное, не ждал идеологичность от этого класса, потому что это не было заложено в программе? Или вы так не считаете?
Можно сказать, что он просто столкнулся с идеологией, которая оказалась не по силам, которая не планировалась.
Yes, well, if you ask what is more important, ideology or loyalty? And I think there's basically the dilemma we're in today is that it seems like, as this happens many times in politics, loyalty becomes more important than competence, or technical competence. Loyalty becomes more important than technical competence. And when loyalty becomes this important, it of course makes treason the most important category, or betrayal. So you start looking for people who betray, because loyalty, when loyalty becomes such a high virtue, when it becomes more important than ability to contribute to Russia's development, technical knowledge, ability to bring in resources that the country needs to develop. So I think or to put it another way, Putin is always governed by managing insecurity of his elites, and he had to make them insecure enough that they would work together, but not so insecure that they would run away. And he is going, to me, he's going too far in this direction. He's cranking up, he's creating too much insecurity. And the consequence, I think, will be more capital flight, fewer connections with the modern world. And I don't see why he abandoned so completely the strategy underlying the tandem. I mean, it's fine to become president again, that's one thing. But the point of the tandem was to say, there are many Russias, and they can all be part of the same project. Instead of saying, no, unless you are 100% loyal, in a way, and that means be willing to give up your life insurance, because many Russians have money abroad because it's insurance. It's a krisha. They're looking for a krisha abroad, in another jurisdiction. They want to educate their children abroad. It's not that they love Russia, they want to be in Russia, they want to continue their connection with Russia. But they feel able to do that because they had an insurance policy, which is resources in a foreign jurisdiction and family, a place to educate their children. He tells them, you must give up your insurance policy. Give up your, and that, it doesn't seem to me that's a way to mobilize the best resources for his own, even for his own project. So I think it's in a way it's very kind of paradoxical, because in democracy, the people use the insecurity of leaders in order to make them serve the public interest. So you're in office, but you can be thrown out of office. So you're always insecure. You can't be in office forever. Obama had to run again, and he can't. So this was because office is insecure. But it seems like what we have in Russia is sort of the opposite. That is, instead of Putin, he doesn't want to be insecure. He doesn't want at all that. But it's as if he's using insecurity and too much. I think it's too much. I don't really understand why he had to go so far and pushing these kinds of, particularly the vigilante activities. In other words, saying using this rhetoric, which seems very strong about anti-gay, just as if it's a open season on gay people. Not that he's going to do anything to the gay people, but it seems like a kind of invitation to violence. I mean, I don't understand. I don't know. I'm not an expert about this kind of thing, but I don't understand why he has turned so strongly, particularly in the direction of demanding absolute loyalty, which he didn't before. So this was new. He was able, from the time he came in, to include many different groups into the system. And it seemed to work fairly well, and the country was growing and developing. But somehow, after the election of 2012, he made a decision that he was going to change the conditions under which he was going to work with other groups. And they were going to have to be 100% loyal 100% of the time. And why does he need that? That's what I don't understand.
Отсутствие защиты и отсутствие безопасности может политически выстраиваться на разных основаниях. Да? То есть он может создавать эту небезопасность разными способами. Как вы считаете, какие способы он использует? Это насилие, это страх, это перетасовка элит, это отсутствие возможности развивать свои экономические инициативы. Что прежде всего, какие рычаги он использует для того, чтобы создавать эту небезопасность? По вашему мнению, конечно.
So the question is, how do you create security if you're telling people who put their money abroad that they are in some way betraying the fatherland and that they need to bring their money back where you could take it away from them if you wanted. I don't see within Russia, obviously over time, if Russia became a more orderly state, then it would be possible to create security in the country. But as long as the institutions are so weak, and the key weakness of the Russian system today is that there is no rule and no procedure and no agency or organization which could take on the burden of replacing Putin if he disappeared. So there's no succession formula. There's no rule. Any state, every state, monarchies, republics, whatever, every state in the world China has a system for replacing the leader. Every state has a system for replacing the leader. If he dies, or if he becomes incapacitated, or if he becomes ill. I think Russia is the only major power in the world that has no system for replacing the leader. And that is a sign of incredible weakness, state weakness, institutional weakness. And I think there's no way to create security in a state that it depends on the life of one 62-year-old man. It's just not possible. It's one person. He's an immortal person. So look at any other country, monarchies, it doesn't matter. They have a system for replacing the leader. And in Russia, there's none. It used to be, under the communist system, there was the Politburo. And you could, when Andropov or someone got ill, they could replace them. But there is no Politburo. There's no Communist Party. There's no system. So this is weakness, and it means everyone is insecure. And it means Putin is insecure, because people look at him and they say, what are we going to do when you're gone? And he sees them thinking that, and he doesn't like that. And so you've created, it's a system of almost structural insecurity. And how to get out of that, given the direction things are going, I don't see very well. Did that make sense?
Мы обратили внимание, что на этой конференции демократия описывалась таким образом, фактически, опасность демократии в России, что основной опасностью демократии в России была ее природа, константа ее развития.
Сама Россия.
Сама Россия, фактически. А как вы считаете, насколько верно и корректно это описание? Насколько вообще можно мыслить природу России, угрожающей природе демократии здесь?
То есть говорилось о внешних опасностях демократии в Европе, о внутренних опасностях в России.
So it's the danger of the nature of, sorry, say it one more time. So is it that there is something dangerous about democracy in Russia, or Russia?
Нет.
Еще раз, повторите, пожалуйста.
Мы вчера обсуждали, в частности, выступление Сергея Караганова, который говорил о том, что основной проблемой России стала ее вековая несостоятельность демократическая. Вековая несостоятельность, связанная с отсутствием возможности управлять в традиционной стране так, как управляют в других странах и так далее. То есть он фактически называл опасностью демократизации в России те константы исторического развития, которые есть в каждой стране, не только в России. Насколько константы исторического развития России действительно делают демократию здесь невозможной.
Yeah. Okay, so a democracy is a system in which parties lose elections. So that's a definition of a democracy. So you can't have a democracy. Democracies are a tiny spot in human history. They have enormous preconditions. And it's a huge mistake to confuse the absence of obstacles with the presence of preconditions. The absence of obstacles means there's no Communist Party, but it doesn't mean democracy doesn't pop out of a society like toast out of a toaster, you know, pop, just as soon as you get rid of the tyranny. That isn't what happens. So democracy requires a very complicated system. The most important aspect of a democracy is that when you lose an election, you don't lose too much. And the problem, the reason democracy is very difficult to create is because in a society like this, if Putin loses power, he would lose too much. It's just too much. So you have to very much limit what you lose. So Cheney and Bush, when they went out of office, they had everything, they kept everything, they're very fine, no problem, there is no trouble. So the difficulty, I would say the number one difficulty of creating democracy in Russia is the problem of who could do for Putin what Putin did for Yeltsin. For Yeltsin left office, and he was protected completely. So it was personal, it wasn't an institution. So the conditions for democratization are the conditions of protecting people when they leave office. And that doesn't exist. Besides, of course, there's no political parties. I mean, that's the other thing. There have to be political parties with political constituencies. They have to be national political parties, which don't exist. So this is a whole nother issue of how you develop parties. But so I think the two things, democracies are systems in which parties lose elections. So if there are no political parties, serious political parties, with constituencies, with platforms that can mobilize and support publicly, then you can't have democracy. And then you have to have a system where leaving office is not dangerous. Personally, you can't lose your wealth, you can't lose your life, you can't lose your freedom when you leave office. And that's very difficult to support. And the reason democracies are rare, historically they are very rare, is because of this.